Welcome to The Explainer. We spent a lot of time thinking about what to say to persuade someone. But what if the real magic happens before you even say a word? Today, we're diving into those hidden moments, the ones that secretly steer our decisions before we even know a decision is being made.
Okay, so let's jump right in with a pretty intense scenario. I want you to imagine you're on a jury. The prosecution's big piece of evidence? A videotaped confession. Seems like an open and shut case, right? Well, what if I told you that just the angle of the camera could be enough to flip your verdict completely? Sounds crazy, but it's true.
And that wild idea brings us to the work of persuasion expert Robert Cialdini. According to Cialdini, the most influential message isn't always the message itself. Nope, it's often the one that's sent right before the main message. He calls this whole concept persuasion. It's all about setting the stage.
So what is persuasion exactly? Well, think of it like this. It's the process of getting people on your side before you've even made your case. You're arranging things so that when they finally hear your message, they're already primed to say yes. It's less about the words you use and more about the mental state you create beforehand.
Cialdini has this brilliant analogy for it. He says the best persuaders are like skilled gardeners, right? They don't just toss seeds onto hard, unprepared ground and hope for the best. No, they spend most of their time preparing the soil, tilling it, enriching it, so that when they finally plant that seed of an idea, it's got the best possible chance to grow.
Okay, so this mental gardening sounds great, but how does it actually work? How do you, till someone's mental soil? Well, the secret lies in a really simple, automatic habit our brains have. It's a little shortcut that, it turns out, can be pretty easily directed.
Is something called the positive test strategy. And it's kind of fascinating. Whenever we're presented with an idea, like, is this person friendly? Our brain's first instinct isn't to be skeptical. Instead, it immediately starts searching for evidence that confirms the idea is true. We automatically look for the hits, the confirmations, and we tend to just ignore the misses, the things that might prove it wrong.
So a smart persuader uses this to their advantage. By getting you to focus on a particular concept, say adventure, they essentially send your brain down what Cialdini calls a psychological chute. And for that brief, powerful window of time, you're just looking for all the reasons to confirm adventure is a good idea. Cialdini calls this a privileged moment, a window where you're super receptive to a related suggestion.
Okay, so there are two really powerful principles at the heart of all this. The first one is super simple but so important. It's this: whatever we focus on, we think is important. Simple as that.
The Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman has a great quote about this. He basically said, "Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it." He called it the focusing illusion. Just by putting a spotlight on something, its importance just balloons in our minds.
And you see this play out in the real world all the time. Check this out. Researchers looked at how people rated the importance of the 9/11 attacks. Normally, about 30% of people ranked it as a top event. But during the week of the 10th anniversary, when the media coverage was everywhere, that number shot up to 65%. The event itself didn't change, right? But because everyone's attention was focused on it, it felt more than twice as important.
But it doesn't stop there. This is where it gets really wild. That brings us to the second principle. Not only does what we focus on seem more important, we also assume it's the cause of whatever is happening. We think what's focal is causal.
So get this, in one study, they had people watch a conversation between a man and a woman. Now here's the trick. Some people were seated so they saw the man's face more clearly. Others were seated so they saw the woman's face more clearly. And guess what? The people who saw the man's face said he was driving the conversation. The people who saw the woman's face said she was. The conversation was identical. The only thing that changed was their focus, and that changed who they thought was the cause.
Okay, so let's bring this all back to that courtroom scene. Armed with these two powerful ideas, that what's focal seems important and what's focal seems causal, you can start to see how a savvy lawyer can begin to craft a story for a jury. They can shape the narrative just by controlling where the jury's attention is focused, long before they make their closing arguments.
And this isn't just theory. It has devastating real-world consequences. Take the tragic case of Peter Riley. He was just 18 years old. After hours and hours of grueling interrogation, he ended up falsely confessing to murdering his own mother. He was innocent, but the intense psychological pressure broke him down, and he gave them the confession that would seal his fate with a jury.
And here's the really scary part. Once a jury hears a confession, it's almost impossible for them to unhear it. One analysis found that a staggering 81% of suspects who give a false confession and later plead not guilty are still convicted. That confession becomes the single, bright focal point of the entire trial.
This is exactly what social psychologist Daniel Lasseter studied, and his research on videotaped confessions is, well, it's chilling. According to socio-trial expert Professor Brandon Blankenship, Lasseter's work shows us just how powerful a simple camera angle can be in silently shaping the story that a jury believes.
So Lasseter showed juries different versions of the same confession video. When the camera was aimed just at the suspect's face, the jury saw the confession as genuine and voluntary. Why? Because the suspect was the focal point, so he must be the cause. That's the shot a prosecutor wants. But when the camera was aimed at the interrogator, the jury saw the confession as forced, as coerced. That's the shot the defense attorney wants. See what's happening? Both sides are trying to persuade the jury just by changing their focus.
And the really crucial thing to get here is that the jurors weren't trying to be biased or unfair. It was an automatic, subconscious process. Their attention got channeled, and the what's focal as causal rule just kicked in. A skilled legal team understands this completely. They know how to frame the entire story by making sure the jury's focused on their version of the cause.
Of course, this power of directed attention goes way beyond the courtroom. You see it in marketing, in management, everywhere. So, what about us? How do we defend ourselves against this? How do we make sure our attention isn't being hijacked to lead us to a conclusion we wouldn't otherwise make? Well, there's actually a pretty simple mental habit you can build. It's really a two-step defense. Step one is simply to notice. The next time you feel yourself being persuaded, just pause and ask, okay, what am I being guided to focus on right now? And then, step two is to deliberately look outside that spotlight. Ask yourself, what's being left out of this picture? What important details might be just outside the frame?
Because that's what this is all about, really. Understanding persuasion is about taking back control of your own focus. Once you realize that your attention is a spotlight that can be directed, you can choose where to aim it. When you learn how to see the frame someone else has built, you're not trapped by it anymore. You get to decide what the whole picture really looks like.